In Colombia, a judge ruled that Alvaro Uribe must go to trial for the crimes of bribery of witnesses and procedural fraud. In El Salvador, more than 1,500 minors were detained since the emergency state began in the country on March 27th. Iraqi Parliament Speaker Mohammed al-Halbouzi arrived in Tehran on an official visit on Wednesday, where he met with top Iranian official Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf to discuss bilateral ties with the neighboring country. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Dio Martin, from the Telesur Studios in Havana. We begin with the news. In Colombia, a judge ruled that Alvaro Uribe must go to trial for the crimes of bribery of witnesses and procedural fraud. This decision gives the green light to the trial against the former president and rejects the request made by the Attorney General's office, which in 2021 argued that there was no evidence against the Democratic Center leader, a decision that was dismissed by Judge Carmen Elena Ortiz Raza. The process for alleged witness manipulation against the former president began more than 4 years ago, when the Supreme Court of Justice refrained from investigating Senator Ivan Cepeda, who was denounced by Uribe for allegedly offering benefits in prisons in exchange for testimonies that implicated the former president in criminal conduct. In Colombia, legal armed groups displaced 80 indigenous people from the Emberacatio village of Santa Isabel in the department of Antioquia. Some 16 indigenous families who were sheltered in the Coliseum in the municipality of Andes since April 26 said that they had to abandon their homes, belongings, and animals in order to safeguard their lives. They denounced that the displacement occurred after a group of hooded men attacked a member of the community, threatening them to leave the territory. After the events, representatives of the indigenous organization of Antioquia called on the government to attend to the humanitarian situation with the families of the indigenous people of Emberacatio.
Organization of Antioquia, we call the entities of the national government, the People Defenders Office, the Indigenous Management of the Government of Antioquia, and national and international human rights defenders to provide special accompaniment to the indigenous families who are currently in a situation of displacement in southwestern Antioquia.
In Colombia, the group of 11 retired military appearing at the hearing of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace acknowledged and apologized to the families of the victims of extrajudicial executions. During the judicial activity and the proceedings being carried out by the JEP for human rights violations in the framework of the armed conflict, the former servicemen before the judges and the victims to recount and accept one by one their responsibility for war crimes, homicide, and forced disappearances. In their testimonies, they revealed that for the crimes of the so-called false positives in Catatumbo, they murdered innocent people and indicated that each action committed was to give results to the high-ranking officers of the armed forces.
I am here in front of you to accept my responsibility as a co-perpetrator of war crimes for the murder of a protected person in crimes against humanity. My lack of fear of God, my lack of love and respect for human life, for human dignity, led me to end up becoming a murderer, a monster for society. I represent, for some of you, a death machine.
Former Army Second Sergeant Sandro Mauricio Perez recognized to having committed crimes against humanity in the Catatumbo.
Today, I accept before you and before the country and before the world that I used my uniform, that I used a rank that I had in the army, a function with the pretext of giving operational results, making them believe that they were legitimate, that they were legal, but that in reality they were murderers that were committed against innocent human beings who had no connection with any group at the margin of the law. They never belonged to them.
More than 1,500 social leaders arrived in Bogota, Colombia on Wednesday to denounce human rights violations and the worsening of the armed conflict. Colombia's Humanitarian Emergency for Life and Defense of Territories organization announced that the social leaders will present a joint declaration to show this humanitarian emergency and to demand actions from the state. A demonstration is also expected at the United Nations headquarters to deliver the document and pay tribute to the social leaders who have been assassinated. A public hearing will be held on Thursday when social leaders will expose the dangers of the communities living in conflict zones. And also in Colombia, the nation's Liberal Party will support the campaign of Equipo por Colombia's presidential candidate Federico Gutiérrez. The official announcement was made by the former president and director of the party, Cesar Gaviria, who had a 4-hour meeting with the presidential candidate on Tuesday. The statement definitively closes the possibility that liberalism, at least at the institutional level, backed the candidacy of Gustavo Petro. Petro said this decision is regrettable and thanked the support of at least 14 liberal congressmen to the historical pact campaign. We're going to take a short break now. Join us again after this. Hello and welcome back to From the South. In El Salvador, more than 1,500 children were detained since the emergency state began in the country on the 27th. They have been detained according to a detention report validated by human rights defenders between March 27th and April 20th. Authorities detained an average of 65 youths per day. The document stated that of the total number of minors detained, some 1,367 are male and 253 are female. According to the investigation, the largest number of detainees is concentrated in the department of San Salvador, with a total of 1,121 captured, followed by San Miguel and Santa Ana with 201 and 155 respectively. The report also warns that the youths will remain in provisional detention while the authorities resolve their legal situation. In Honduras, officials seek solutions to political campaigns being undermined by organized crime.
Preventing from getting into public offices people, criminals, who are part of the organized crime. At this moment, Honduras still has organized criminal people in the government structure, and we have to eliminate that. In fact, this is why the nominating board is so important. That will determine who will be the 15 members of the Supreme Court of Justice.
Appointing honest magistrates, appointing a prosecutor committed to the nation, and of course providing sufficient resources to the political unit. That cleans up. And the parties are in the duty to make a cleanup. Because we cannot continue with rotten apples in all the organizations of the state.
At least 8 people died and 11 resulted injured when competing groups of workers clashed at a cement plant before dawn Wednesday in the central Mexican state of Hidalgo, authorities said. The deadly clash to control the cement plant near Tula, Hidalgo caps at least a decade of angry, sometimes violent disputes within the employees' cooperative that owns both the cement plant and one of Mexico's top soccer teams. Hidalgo Governor Omar Fayad said via Twitter that he strongly condemned the violence at the Cruz Azul Cement Cooperative's plant. He said 9 suspects had been arrested in the clash. Authorities only identified those involved as 2 groups of people, but local media said the clash was related to a long-running leadership dispute at the cooperative. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced joint projects with Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina to handle lithium. The Mexican president indicated there are ongoing talks with the governments of those countries for a meeting to share experiences on the handling of lithium, both in territories where the mineral is nationalized as well as in those where it is not. López Obrador pointed out that the objective is to gather experience to help define the characteristics of the Mexican company that will manage the lithium resources. He also said that the country is making progress in terms of tax collection, which is essential to allocate funds to energy projects, including the management of the mineral. The United Nations Human Rights Committee concluded after 6 years of investigations that former Judge Sergio Moro was biased in his trial of former Brazilian President Lula da Silva in the context of the Lava Jato operation. The committee's ruling states that the human rights of da Silva were violated in 2018 during that judicial process. The decision will be published on April 28th and represents an international blow to Bolsonaro's administration. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, arrived to Ukraine, where he will hold a meeting with the president of that country, Volodymyr Zelensky. The UN Secretary General said that after visiting Moscow, he arrived to Kiev to continue working on the expansion of humanitarian aid and the evacuation of civilians from conflict zones. Guterres held talks on Tuesday in Moscow with President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, where the Russian president stressed that his country does not refuse to negotiate with Ukraine and hopes to reach peace agreements through diplomatic ways. Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed on Wednesday that Russia's response to strategic threats from outside will be immediate and quick.
If someone intervenes in any event from outside or creates strategic threats unacceptable to us, they should know that our response to counterstrikes will be immediate and quick. We have all the instruments that no one could brag about. We will not brag about it. Love for the homeland is a foundation of the statehood and the most important value for our society, which can be visible at crucial moments for the country. Such a solidarity among people means a lot. It guarantees that Russia will decently respond to the most difficult challenges and threats, will pass through all the challenges. It has always been the case, so shall it be now.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back. Iraqi Parliament Speaker Mohammed al-Halbouzi arrived in Tehran on an official visit on Wednesday, where he met with top Iranian official Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf to discuss bilateral ties with the neighboring country. The two officials later held a joint presser where they affirmed the continuity of cooperation between the two countries. Also, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi said that the new Iraqi parliament can play an effective role in the economic and social synergy of Iran and Iraq as before. Likewise, Iraqi Parliament Speaker called for collective action to prevent sanctions and intimidation against sovereign states, saying Baghdad is pushing for proxy diplomacy to resolve regional tensions and encourage negotiations for reconciliation between neighbors. In Lebanon, citizens protested against a capital control bill that was to be debated in the country. The protesters gathered in front of the parliament building in the center of the capital, Beirut, to demonstrate their rejection of this bill, which aims to establish exceptional and temporary controls on bank transfers and cash withdrawals, and adds restrictions to the amounts that individuals and companies can withdraw from their accounts. The public considers that with this measure, the parliament is trying to legislate theft by trying to protect the banks through this law. The parliamentary session dedicated to debate the bill did not take place due to lack of quorum, as several parliamentarians rejected the law. The Syrian government announced before the United Nations that Western countries must be held accountable for their crimes in the Arab country. During a session of the Security Council, the permanent representative of Syria to the United Nations, Ambassador Bassam Sabah, held the United States administration and its Western allies fully responsible for the war that this nation has been facing for 11 years. He further condemned that some Western countries continue to ignore the catastrophic effects of the illegal and unilateral coercive measures imposed on the Syrian people, which have led to a decline in the nation's economic and development indicators. Sabah reaffirmed the determination of Syrians to continue their struggle to free all their occupied lands and called on the Security Council to fulfill its task of stopping and preventing war crimes and crimes against humanity. In South Africa, there is a new wave of COVID-19, according to the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation. The number of new infections in the last 24 hours is still up compared to the last few days, with more than 5,000 cases and 15 deaths, according to the National Institute of Communicable Diseases. Health Minister Joe Phala already expressed his concern last week. The last wave of the disease resulted in greater transmission of the virus, but fewer severe cases. South Africa, where less than 45% of the adult population is fully vaccinated, recorded more than 3.7 million cases and 100,350 deaths in accumulation. Ugandan health authorities announced Wednesday the elimination of the mandatory use of face masks in open, uncongested places for those vaccinated against COVID-19. The Minister of Health, Jane Ruth Assing, said in a press conference that the use of protective masks will remain mandatory in closed places, such as public transport, schools, and stores. She recommended that vulnerable people or those with comorbidities, regardless of their age, should wear protection at all times to avoid contagion. She also announced that as of May 9th, inoculation of junior high school students will begin, as well as the elimination of the presentation of real-time PCR tests for travelers arriving in Uganda, although they will have to show vaccination certificates. In Ghana, the push towards community vaccination increased at a time when the country still faces the threat of rising infections as well as vaccine hesitancy. The government is pushing to inoculate around 23 million out of a total of 31 million people and prepares a new strategy to reach the goal. The community vaccinator, Doretta Connie, said that the house-to-house vaccination is more effective because most people, when they come to the facilities, see a lot of queues and they don't get the vaccination on time. Ghana registered over 160,000 cases of COVID-19 and at least 1,445 deaths so far. According to numbers presented by the World Health Organization, UNICEF, in the first 2 months of 2022, about 17,338 cases of measles were reported worldwide. Given this rapid increase in the disease and the high contagion capacity of measles, the two agencies warned that cases tend to appear quickly when vaccination levels decrease. The fall was caused mainly by three factors: alterations caused by the pandemic, increasing inequalities in access to vaccines, and the diversion of resources. At the same time, the two agencies expressed concern that the situation might not become the prelude to other outbreaks that do not spread so quickly. We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at Telstar English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telstar English, I am Leo Martin. Thanks for watching.